Welcome to Underworld UK, where Britain's darkest stories are brought to light. From the gritty streets of gangland London, Liverpool, Manchester and Birmingham, from Curtis Warren to the Cray twins to county lines and modern-day true crime, we cover everything. Bringing you new videos every week. Subscribe so that you'll be notified when the next video is put out.
In the spring of 2020, as Britain sat locked indoors and delivery drivers became a symbol of normality in an upside-down world, one routine knock at a front door in Liverpool set off a chain reaction that would tear apart one of the most powerful criminal organisations the city had ever produced. What appeared at first glance to be another pandemic-era drop-off was in fact the opening move in a brutal robbery that exposed the inner workings of the underworld, triggered a wave of planned revenge killings, and ultimately led to the downfall of Vincent Coggins, a man who had spent decades operating at the very top of Britain's drug trade while remaining almost invisible to the public. Vincent Coggins grew up in Knowsley's Huyton Firm estate, later renamed Stockbridge Village, during the 1970s and 80s, a period defined by unemployment, deprivation and the steady pull of organised crime across Merseyside. Alongside his older brother Francis, Vincent came of age at a time when Liverpool's traditional crime hierarchies were shifting. As figures like Curtis Warren and other dominant players were jailed or removed from the streets, a vacuum opened, and the Gogggins brothers were patient enough, disciplined enough, and ruthless enough to fill it. They did not rise quickly, and they did not rise loudly. Unlike flashier gangsters, Vincent cultivated a reputation for calculation rather than chaos. He avoided unnecessary feuds, delegated violence instead of indulging in it personally, and focused on scale. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the brothers had quietly assembled what became known as the Huyton Firm, also referred to by police as the Huyton Firm cartel, a tightly controlled network dealing in wholesale quantities of cocaine and heroin across the UK. Vincent ran the domestic operation from Merseyside, overseeing stash houses, enforcers and distributors, while Francis handled the international supply chain, spending long periods in mainland Europe, particularly the Netherlands. Together, they built a pipeline capable of importing tons of Class 8 drugs, feeding markets from Liverpool to Manchester, Wales, Scotland and beyond. The firm was disciplined, secretive and highly profitable. Those who worked beneath the brothers knew decisions came from the top and disobedience carried consequences. For years, the firm stayed ahead of law enforcement by embracing technology. Like many elite criminal groups, they relied on EncroChat, an encrypted phone network believed to be impenetrable, to coordinate shipments, discuss violence, move money, and manage internal discipline. Vincent operated under the handle Moonlit Boat, earning the nickname the Headmaster among associates, while Francis used multiple aliases while running the supply line from abroad. They believed their conversations were invisible. They were wrong. On the morning of Saturday, May 23, 2020, the firm suffered the kind of hit Vincent Coggins could not ignore. A white van pulled up outside a house in West Derby, used as a stash location. One of the men approached the door, posing as a delivery driver. When the door opened, masked attackers burst inside, armed with blades. A father and son were slashed in a frenzied attack. Blood sprayed across the hallway, and around 30 kilos of cocaine, worth more than £1 million, was taken in minutes. The attackers vanished, leaving behind a scene so violent it shocked even seasoned detectives. By that evening, Vincent Coggins knew the drugs were gone. His response was immediate and cold. EncroChat messages captured his rage as he demanded the thieves be identified and punished. Suspicion first fell on the very people guarding the stash, before shifting to rival Liverpool figures. Vincent became fixated on Brian Maxwell and his son, convinced without proof that they were responsible. What followed was one of the most dangerous moments in the firm's history. Vincent began openly discussing murder, grenades and firearms over encrypted messages, ordering associates to source weapons and plan reprisals. He talked about killing multiple people, not just those he believed responsible, but anyone connected. His closest lieutenant, Paul Woodward, helped coordinate these plans, while others circulated CCTV footage through criminal channels in an attempt to identify the robbers. Unbeknownst to them, police were watching everything in real time. The French-led hack of EncroChat had cracked open the underworld, giving UK investigators unprecedented access to conversations they were never meant to see. Officers from the Northwest Regional Organised Crime Unit watched as Vincent's plans escalated from threats to imminent action. Fearing a wave of murders across Merseyside, police intervened, issuing threat-to-life warnings and disruption notices as they scrambled to prevent bloodshed. Terrified for his son's life, Brian Maxwell's father made a desperate move. Knowing his son was innocent, but believing Vincent would kill him regardless, he offered to pay more than £1.3 million in cash and property to make the threat disappear. Vincent accepted, but even then, his messages revealed the truth. He had no intention of letting it end there. He spoke of killing them in a few months when it all calms down, treating human lives as delayed transactions. While Vincent hunted shadows in Liverpool, the truth sat quietly in EncroChat data. The robbery had not been carried out by local rivals at all. It was the work of Salford-based crime family, led by brothers Jason and Craig Cox, operating with Liverpool associate Richard Caswell. They had posed as delivery drivers, carried out reconnaissance, and escaped with the cocaine, later splitting the proceeds and selling them on through Manchester networks. Even the handover password, Man City, was logged by police. As Vincent pushed closer to violence, police made their move. In June 2020, key members of the Huyton Firm were arrested before any reprisals could be carried out. Vincent Coggins was charged with conspiracy to supply Class A drugs and conspiracy to commit blackmail, his own messages forming the backbone of the case against him. In court, the scale of the operation became clear. Over just a matter of months, the firm had been linked to the movement of hundreds of kilos of cocaine and heroin, worth millions of pounds. Vincent was sentenced to 28 years in prison, a man once feared across Merseyside, now reduced to a defendant in a dock, undone by the very technology he trusted. Yet the story did not end there. His brother vanished. For 5 years, the international architect of the operation lived quietly in the Dutch coastal town of Zandvoort, evading detection, until a drunken collapse on the street led local police to identify him. Extradited back to the UK, Francis was sentenced to 18 years after admitting his role in importing more than a ton of Class A drugs into Britain. A career that spanned decades ended not with a gunfight or betrayal, but with a stumble in public. By the time the final trials concluded, the Huyton Firm was finished, its leadership jailed, its networks exposed, its reputation, once whispered, now documented in court transcripts and police exhibits. What had begun in the estates of Knowsley ended with encrypted messages read aloud in courtrooms. Vincent Coggins did not fall because he lost his nerve or because a rival outgunned him. He fell because the modern underworld had nowhere to hide. And when the silence was broken, the words that destroyed him were his own.
I mean, I used to go up to Liverpool and work on the knocker and buy antiques. And there were people in Liverpool at that time, a lot younger. There was Vincent Dickie Coggins and the heightened crew. But at that time, they were robbing post offices. They were sort of armed robbers and doing their thing in the late 80s. But then everyone turned their attention to the drugs business because the vast amounts of money that could be earned. And then Dickie and Francis Coggins moved to, the Canny Farm brothers moved to Marbella. And then what happened, we went through the 90s and there was all the dance music and everyone was loving each other and all that. And then they replaced the ecstasy and the dancing with cocaine. And then what happened, we saw in the 2000s the rise of the Irish cartel, the Kinahan cartel, with Christy Kinahan Sr., Daniel Kinahan and Christopher Kinahan Jr.
To them names, what you've just been speaking about. Well, let's bring it back to the 80s when you're speaking about Dickie Coggins and Francis Coggins. So they were pavement robbers, was they?
Well, I think they do anything. You know, they were just career criminals, and they were doing well. I think Dickie last got arrested in '89 up in Scotland on a post office thing. But then what they discovered was that the drug business was so lucrative, but they were always careful. I mean, for 30 years, never used a mobile phone, would only speak in person. And then, which still amazes me, they all got captured by the EncroChat, which, is unbelievable, really, for people that secretive, that careful, to allow themselves to be suckered into a system. Because as you know, Darren, there's no such thing as an encrypted service. It's only encrypted until they crack it.
Yeah, so when we're speaking about the Coggins and their associates doing robberies, was their associates like Gerard and
Bobby? Uncle Bobby Gerard. There was who else? Michael Earl, Edward Jarvis, John Burns, Wayne Pearson. He's like the ghost. He just gets in the graft, gets a chunk of money, couple of million, and then goes away for a couple of years.
So, them names you've just mentioned, mate, was they doing the pavement robberies together in the 80s?
Well, they were doing that, a bit of fraud, a bit of dealing in stolen property. If they got antiques or anything like that, I'd probably buy some of them off of them.
So basically, the names you've just spoke about there in the 80s, doing the crimes that they used to commit before they turned to dealing drugs. Yeah. Basically, what we're looking at now in the year 2020s, basically, is they are supposedly and allegedly the Liverpool Mafia, aren't they?
Yeah, well, yes. Well, I mean, as you know, it's very tribal. So you've got the group from heightened Dovecot. You've got a group from down in Speke. You've got a group from over the water on the Wirral. That was the Mohays, degenerate gamblers they were. But again, they were under the radar and no one ever knew anything about it. Then you got this influx, as we say, of the Irish cartel, and the bridge between the Liverpool underworld, Merseyside underworld, and the Irish cartel was a man called Tony Judge. He was the bridge that brought them together.
I know Tony Judge, and I've known Tony Judge all my life. He supplied the firearms to the kids that tried to kill me, which came from the Kinahans. But I've known Tony Judge since he was around the banker. You're aware who the banker is?
Philip Glennon.
Yeah, Philip Glennon Senior. So anyway, we'll go back to the Coggins because I've been quite interested in that family for quite a few years. I know these are the Huyton and the West Derby firm. They're from them ends, but they've always had a good impact upon organised crime a bad impact upon organised crime within the city. I just want to go a bit deeper on them and, their ability to... You named a few names, likes of John Burns. I've had a bit of intelligence off that. Is it John Burns, yeah?
Yeah, John Burns, who I describe as the first Scouser billionaire in the drug business.
Yeah, well, John Burns, I was getting a lot of intelligence about him a good couple of months ago, and I believe he was working with the Serbians in South Africa, wasn't he? Having the Serbians doing all crazy, mad stuff in South Africa recently.
Yeah, what happened, you see, was John Burns' story in the late 80s. He got hold of a chemist who could make ecstasy, so they didn't have to import it from the Netherlands. So they made an absolute fortune. All the Huyton crew, the Canny Farm brothers, they made a fortune. But then John Burns moved to South Africa, and he started importing drugs to send down to Australia, because in Australia you can get 5 times the amount of profit because it's more expensive. And so he was working with Serbians. They lost a load of a ton of cocaine and John Burns refused to pay them. So the Serbians sent out a hit team of 6 hitmen to South Africa, but John Burns had mercenaries working for him and they wiped out all the 6 of them, and it was all over the place, papers. They were finding dead bodies all over South Africa. But they managed to...
Sorry, mate. It got to the point where they planted an IED under the car of John Burns, didn't they?
Well, it's worse. Yeah, worse than that. They put a bomb under the seat of his armour-plated Range Rover. When it blew up, because it was armour-plated, right, he survived, but he lost his behind, and he was in hospital for months having reconstructive surgery of his backside. He then moved to Dubai, and latest on John Burns is he's working with the Albanians, sending in huge amounts of Class A narcotics to the UK. See, everyone focuses on the Kinahans because they're all in the news, but they're not the only ones out there. They're not the only cartel that's operating. I mean, no one really knows of John Burns. And as I say, he was the first Scouser billionaire with a B that no one really knows much. You know, of course you do. But your average public don't know about him.
So you mentioned other names there before, and one in particular was Jarvis, mate. Is that the same Jarvis that was arrested and was a snitch for the Newcastle authorities back in the 90s, or is this a different Jarvis?
I think on the John Carrington, the Carrington case.
Yeah, he was co-accused with Warren, wasn't he?
Curtis Warren, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, look, these are old names that have been floating around. Michael Earl, Woody Woodford, we got Edward Jarvis, you got Dickie Coggins, you got Francis Coggins in Marbella. His wife's not very well, Mrs. Coggins. Well, and to be honest with you, I wish her all the best. It's not her fault, is it? You know, you can't blame her, but she's suffering from cancer, Mrs. Coggins. That's Francis's wife in Marbella. But yeah, you see, and what's happened is the daughters now have taken over the money laundering, Darren. You know, there's one daughter in particular that's got all the business. She flies around the world with like an entourage of scousers, like tough guys, bodyguards, and they create sort of fear wherever they go. I've had people in Bali tell me that they can't go to Bali, in Indonesia causing trouble. They go to Marbella, Port of Banus, Dubai and all that. So it's being passed down the family. But the next generation, though, Darren, which people don't understand, is the girls, the women are just as ruthless as the men.
You know, when I mentioned earlier on Gerard, and you called him Uncle Bob Gerard, he's due out of custody in about 16 months' time, isn't he? Do you reckon he's going to jump right back into the fold of what's been going on?
Is the Pope a Catholic? Of course he will. What else is he going to do? Because in that world, you know, Darren, within 6 or 9 months, you can get several £1 million, right, profit. I mean, there's an Irish criminal called Brian Rattigan. He was released last year from jail, went to Spain. He's with John Gilligan, John Cunningham. He's got Gerard Scarface Lynch in Dublin. In 9 months, Darren, he's got 25 million euros profit in his back pocket. So that's, what else are they going to do? I mean, what else do these people do? We know that.
So referring back to the 80s, mate, have you ever been aware of a name called Frank Lowe?
Frank Lowe, only historically when I've done research. I never sort of came into any contact with him. But I mean, again, you're talking about sort of like 1.5 generations ago, aren't you? He was there with, is it that man, Mr. Gilday was another one. There was Fat Stan. Do you remember Fat Stan? Yeah. He was another one at Heightened, because actually Fat Stan was the patriarch. He was the original OG in Heightened, and the likes of Vincent Coggins, Jarvis and Earl and all them, they were the after Fat Stan. And now people think that they're the original.
Are you speaking about Stan Carnell?
I think so. All I know is Fat Stan. You would know more than what I do, but you know who I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah, there's a couple of Fat Stans. I've been in prison with a Fat Stan, and he's currently gone back to prison in the last 5 years. So